This is my passive flexibility cool down from September 25th. So I started off with a seated pike. I really love passive flexibility as part of my cool down because I find it really relaxing and calming, and it helps to relieve any tension in my body. So I'm doing a little bit of rocking here. I find this feels good for the legs and the hips. I'm breathing freely and listening to my body as I stretch. And I like to do some different spine undulations in different versions of the forward fold. So here I'm exhaling down and inhaling up. Next, I'm coming into a stretch that addresses the lateral line of the leg. I can feel it in the gluteal region, the iliotibial band region, and down the peroneals of the lateral lower leg. And if you were to try these stretches at home and you can't reach full knee extension, it's okay to bend the knees too. Just depends on where you're at that day and your current level of flexibility. Then I went into some quadricep / hip flexor focused stretching. I started with one of my favorites, which is a great kneeling rectus femoris focus stretch. And I believe I went for 3 deep breaths on each side. So I start the movement by entering a passive lunge shape. I bring the heel up and then grab that back foot with both hands. After my hip flexors were warmed up from that stretch, I went into a sequence that I like to do for the hip flexors and the quadriceps and the fascia and tissues in general around the hip flexors and quadriceps. So I start with the stretch that I just did. Then I go to a diagonal stretch. I really like the way that this one feels. And the third stretch, I bring the hand down, and it's still a diagonal type stretch with a slightly different body position. And then I took that stretching sequence on the other side. Focusing on 3 deep breaths per stretch. And coming into the diagonal stretch. and then the diagonal stretch with the hand on the floor. Next, I went into a standing forward fold sequence, inhaling my arms up and exhaling down. I like to do, like I said earlier, a little bit of undulation sometimes in a forward fold variation. Inhaling, extending the spine, and exhaling, relaxing the spine. I find that it really helps with releasing tension in the neck. And then here I'm coming into some lateral movements in the forward fold, just sliding back and forth. I find that this helps stretch the muscles and tissues along the spine a little bit differently than if I were to just stay in the forward fold. And a big part of cool down for me is just relaxing my mind, relaxing my body, tuning into my breath, and taking this time for some compassionate self-awareness. Next, I went into my seated straddle, one of my favorite stretches to do every day. So I was just setting up my straddle position, getting onto my sits bones, the ischial tuberosities, and then starting by going into a side stretch from the seated straddle position. And if you were to try any of these seated straddle exercises, your level of flexibility may be different than mine. Some people might need to bend the knees a bit or put a yoga block underneath the pelvis to accommodate the stretch. And here I'm going into a forward straddle. And then some side to side walking with the hands. Any side to side motions with the forward fold or the straddle help to stretch the muscles and tissues from different angles than if we were just to stay folded forwards. Here I'm doing a lateral flexion side reach. Feels so good. And finishing up that straddle sequence with the full forward straddle. And then from here I went to lying on my back. Starting with the knees to chest. And then setting up for a bridge exercise. I'm just turning my feet out slightly and getting my hips close to my heels. So I went into a head bridge. This is an exercise I've been enjoying lately. And I really like bridges for stretching the anterior chain of the body. I get the abdominals stretched. And I lifted my head off a bit as well for a loaded bridge, stretching the anterior chain. We get the abdominals, the hip flexors, the neck flexors. And then I went through a few hip rotations just to balance out that bridge pose. And I finished that stretching sequence by loosening up my neck, lying on my back, and taking some time to relax my body and connect to my breath. I often like to use a progressive relaxation at the end of practice, just on each exhale, softening a certain body part or muscle group a little bit more. For example, I might start with the muscles in my face, and then on an exhale, relaxing and softening the muscles in my face, and then progressively move down to my neck, shoulders, arms, hands, wrist, chest, abdominals, hips, thighs, knees, calves and shins, ankles, feet and toes. So it's just a really nice way to calm the nervous system and to integrate everything that you've done in your movement practice that day. Then I did a little side twist, rolled over the side, and I came into a cross-legged posture. Taking a moment to root down into my sits bones, align my spine, and take a couple of breaths from the seated cross-legged position. And I finished my practice by going for a walk outdoors, appreciating nature, the fresh air and the sunshine, and to help regulate the muscle tone in my body after the passive flexibility.